Hello, today we are somewhere slightly different. We're actually in the local area close to me in Sheffield, which is Burbage Valley. And this is about 20 minutes from my home and the Lattice HQ, and one of the locations where we'll often come to do some bouldering. Now, in this video, I want to kind of just go through the kit list, the real, you need to have these items in your bag when you're going bouldering. And you'll have noticed that there's a reasonable number of things on the pads in front of me here. And I want to explain why we take this many items bouldering. And it's not just a case of a chalk bag and a pair of shoes and that's it, that's all you need. I mean, you can do that and it is possible to go really minimal, but there are also some really nice other extra tools to take with you that will get you the most out of your session, give you the highest likelihood of getting up those projects, and will just give you a much nicer time when you go bouldering. So let's get through the list, work through everything, and I'll kind of explain how it all works. Now, first up, I think, is just talking about clothing and what we're wearing at the crag. Because when we're bouldering, we often have, we're working at a really high intensity, we're often needing lots of mobility, interesting moves, extreme range of motion. So it's good to have clothing that we can wear that allows us, so some stretch in it, so we can move our hands in all directions, our legs as well, but also warm clothing when we get back down and sat on the mats and, resting or spotting friends or just socializing at the crag. So make sure that you've got a nice kind of warm duvet jacket, something that's going to really insulate you and keep you warm. The other thing is a hat. Now, I take one of these to the crag pretty much every day when I go out, and it might not actually be the coldest conditions, but it's amazing how much heat you lose out through your head. And yeah, you might want to take it off when you're bouldering, but sat around, it's a really good way to maintain that heat in your body once you've warmed up. So I'm just sat here now, I'm going to put this on and keep me warm whilst I'm telling you about all these items. It'll help me stay warm before I do some bouldering in a bit. Okay, pads. I've actually got two different types of pads here. I've got the briefcase style pad where there's a hinge in the middle and that closes up across the hinge. And then I've got a taco style pad here where it folds and we haven't got the hinge. They both have their advantages and disadvantages. I like the briefcase pads because they tend to roll up much more compact, and we can get those into tighter spaces in cars if we haven't got estate or van-sized cars. And you can often stack more of them together and strap them down so you have two or three and you can put them on the back and it doesn't kind of fill out so much space. The taco style pads, on the other hand, are a little bit better for those boulders where you've got really uneven landings, or they're sketchy, or there's kind of boulders that stick up, because in the middle of the briefcase style pad there's essentially a dead spot where the hinge is and there's no foam. So if your boulders underneath lie in that spot, it just isn't quite as good. So I think the two variations, it's good to kind of try them out in the shop, play around with them and understand how those two different types of pads work. The other thing that I think is really important to know in terms of the pad is the way the foam is laid out inside. So if I open up this one here and get inside the pad, is you can see that I've actually got three different types of foam here. So I've got a much lower density foam on the bottom and the top. One's thin, one's thick, and then I've got this really hard, high density foam. Now, you want to make sure that that highest density foam is laid on the top side of the pad. Yes, you may have this really thin layer on top of that as well, but you want to make sure, a lot of pads, like the one that I'm sat on, actually has one thick, low density foam and then one thinner, high density foam. Make sure that high density foam is on the top side. That will break the fall, really help with the impact, especially when you're going from higher up. And I say this because of the design of some of the pads. It sometimes leads you to logically place the pad the other way around. So have a quick look inside your pad. It'll last a lot longer and it'll work a lot longer for those high falls and not kind of, bottoming out on the pad and protecting your ankles or your back or your bum if you fall off in that way as well. Okay, so that's your pad. Next up is a guidebook. I think these are absolutely essential to take out with you. Not just because it'll explain the area, all the boulder problems that you're looking for and the grades and everything, but also at the beginnings of any of the guidebooks, you'll often have guidance on how to treat the area, the ethics of the area, how you should behave, access, places you should park, you shouldn't park. And this is becoming really important nowadays, that the crags, they're really getting quite crowded in a lot of the honey spot area or honey pot areas. And it's really key that we actually kind of just treat the environment respectfully. We don't all crowd in the same areas. We park in the right spots. And we use the nice outdoors in the appropriate way, and we don't wreck it. So I think that's also really important to look in those guidebooks, because wherever I've traveled around the world, the rules and the etiquette of using different areas can be very different. So it's good to be aware of that, even if you're just in a different part of the country, because they can be quite variable. Okay, next up, let's look at shoes. Okay, so I will typically bring out at least 2 pairs of shoes to me with the crags. So today I've got 1 pair of really worn-in shoes, and then another pair with a much sharper edge. So these are better for edging and kind of stiffer. I've chosen, today we're on gritstone, so it's quite flat. A lot of the terrain is slabby or vertical. So I've got a very flat shoe. So you can see across there that it's not a kind of banana down aggressive steep climbing shoe. So this is going to be good on smearing and flat edges. I've gone for an open shoe. So it's just a mock pull on with a Velcro over the side of it. And again, I think it's important to have 2 shoes just from the warm-up and performance point of view, because often our performance shoes are tighter. You can't wear them for very long. And if you want to go bouldering for a whole day, then it's just going to be hideous wearing the really tight performance shoe all day long. So definitely recommend having 2 pairs of shoes. I've seen people come out with 5, 6 pairs of shoes and have ones that have different modifications on them and different heels and all sorts of different things, so that they can try all their problems and try them out. So I think that's worth knowing, that you don't just want 1 pair of shoes. Chalk, whether you go for big chalk bucket like this or a chalk bag to go around your waist, I think it doesn't make a great deal of difference. But it is good to have something which you can get easy access to and is appropriate for the type of climbing you're doing. So if you're going to be doing long traversing or high boulder problems, then I would advise having either liquid chalk, so the chalk stays with you longer, or having it around your waist, just so you can chalk up mid-traverse or higher up on that problem. If you get sweaty, you're not going to have someone lobbing this up to you halfway at the boulder problem trying to chalk up again. So chalk, always really important. Next up, in relation to chalk as well, is having something that you can brush the holds down to get them to the best possible conditions. So the friction is really good on them. And then secondly is cleaning tick marks where you're the crag. Now, tick marks, we've all seen them in the videos. We've also seen them turning up to a crag and they're left behind by other people. I think it's really good practice that when you go to the crag, to clean off tick marks, both of other people, so it's just like general crag care, but when you leave the crag, make sure that you're cleaning those tick marks. Secondly is that the holds on certain rock types, especially on sandstone, are really particular in terms of the grain. So really rubbing out and getting the chalk and sometimes a little bit of the rubber residue from your shoes that's left on them out of the grain in the rock will really improve the friction. So take care of the rock, take a brush out with you and work on those holds. Don't overdo it, and also be really careful that once you wear your brush down, if you're getting down to the wood or the plastic, you're not grinding that into the rock as well. It's another thing that have seen people doing, and I know it costs a £5 or a £10 for a new brush, but invest in that brush because it's better just not to wreck the holds for everyone else afterwards. Okay, next up is food and water. Make sure you've got some adequate water with you, some food with you. Mina will be telling me to make sure that some of it is fast, high access carbohydrates, just so you can get the energy in on your session. Wrappers, get them in your bag, take them home, don't leave them around. Same goes for finger tape as well, that I'll talk about in a second. Just be really careful with all that litter at the crags. Again, there's a lot of us out at the crags nowadays, so really kind of treat them with respect. Water, one trick that I think is useful to know for this is that if I go to a new area, particularly if I'm doing first ascents, is I will take more water than I need, and then I will combine with my brush at the end of the session. So say I haven't done the problem and I feel like the problem hasn't got clean enough. So there's like algae or there's lichen on the rock, and you're in an area where it's okay to clean. So do be careful in some areas. They're very particular, this is not okay, but in areas where it's okay to clean that green algae or lichen off the rock, is I wash down with the water and a brush, and I scrub down those holes just to make them cleaner. It will leave the problem wet, but overnight it will dry out and it'll be really, really good condition for when you come back to the next session. So that's a really good trick. I've used it on roots and boulders. Tape, I typically bring two forms of tape out with me. So I bring a thinner tape and a thicker tape. I do quite a lot of jamming, I like crack climbing, so I'll have a thick one for that. And then for my thinner tape, I'll use my fingers, whether I'm taping pulleys or covering up any splits on the skin, or if I kind of break through and I'm getting thin on the skin. And the nice thing to have is that when you're in the shop and you're choosing your tape type, is get the tape, pull it off, and check that with the tape that you can split it and you can actually change this down, because there's different ways of taping up your fingers that will really affect how the performance works. So make sure that you can do this thin split, because some tapes that you'll find are just horrible for splitting, and it'll really frustrate you because you can't tape up properly at the crag. Another thing to check as well with your tape is make sure that it's not really, really old, because if you leave these in the sun for enough time, like on the back of the parcel shelf in your car, the sort of the resin glue goes in the tape and they end up being not very sticky. So check that. They have got an expiry on them as well. Also talking about hands and condition of your hands, is having something to be able to file your skin. Now, I think a lot of people think of this as being a really elite thing to do, and you wouldn't, not every climber should do this, and it's almost related to how experienced or how high a grade you're climbing. But actually looking after your skin condition is just vitally important to performing on rock. And what I'll do is that, so say I'm coming out today and I'm doing some climbing, is I'll look down and I'll look for either little sort of micro flaps that are occurring on my skin, just they've broken in previous sessions, or where I'm getting calluses forming and they're just thickening up on the skin. So it's either going to be glassy or I've got a chance of pulling that whole callus off. So even before I start going, I'll start rubbing in and I'll start working down those calluses. And especially in the creases where I'm getting little micro flaps on the skin, I'll just rub those off and take those down, just so I've got a really flat, even layer on the skin, because otherwise that'll just start to ruck up and it'll pull and it can end up in a tear. Another little trick with the sandpaper and the sanding blocks is that if you've got a really rough section of skin and you're struggling with the grain of sandpaper to be able to kind of work it down and move it, is just lick your hand and just make it a tiny little bit damp and then rub into it when it's a little bit damp, and you can wear so much more skin off with just a tiny little bit of damp. In fact, I can see how much is worn onto this block here. And that was just like, 4 or 5 rubs there, is you can get through that skin a lot more easy. Just a little bit of spit on it or a little bit of water and it'll break it down. Obviously not too much because we want dry skin, but that's a really good item to have at the crag. And I thoroughly advise trying to find one that has some kind of contour or change in shape in it, just so you can get into those hard to work areas. So look after your skin, even before and after the session. Next up, again, with the skin, I've got a pair of crack gloves that I often take out with me. I use these for jamming. You'll be surprised at how many moves you'll also find on standard boulder problems where you might have a jam or two. So having a pair of gloves, or you can do them with tape, is useful. So that's another thing that I have spare. For warming up, I have 2 items that I'll take to the crag, whether I'm bouldering or route climbing. One is a TheraBand and the other is a portable fingerboard. With these, they can be either hung up on a tree, at a bolt sometimes if you're at a crag where you're bouldering, and there's route climbing as well, and you can do some hangs off this. The other good combo is that if you have a carabiner on your portable board, is clipping the TheraBand into that carabiner and then putting that under the foot, and you can do finger curls and you can do curls and sort of really warm up the fingers a lot better. That's a really nice combo. So have that carabiner. I know it seems like a route climbers thing, for boulders would never have a carabiner, but set that set up, get your TheraBand, and it's a really good way of warming up as well. I also use the TheraBand just to warm up major muscle groups. So anything I want to warm up my back, I can do any of the movements like this. Same again for anything with biceps, legs, is you can combo those TheraBands down the feet as well. And it's just just look on YouTube and you can see a whole range of warm-up exercises that you can do with a TheraBand. Maybe 2 different colors would be good, just in terms of difficulty. This one's a really light TheraBand, so I've had to make this one super short to be able to get some intensity out of it. So that's another really key item for warming up. Obviously, it goes without saying that jogging around at the crag, getting warm, raising your heart rate is really important in that warm-up as well. But TheraBand's a great way of getting warmed up on those really cold days. It kind of combos with that, white, nice warm clothing as well, just to stay warm once you've got warmed up as well. And last item that I want to go through as well is a choice of bag when you're going to the crag. Now, when you go to the crag, you will often have a load of bouldering pads, and you'll be thinking, right, how am I going to stack all these boulder pads together and carry these all with me, but also have a rucksack? So that's why I always have in the hallway at home a low profile, thin rucksack, because I can slide these in between the bouldering pads. So a lot of bouldering pads like this one here, it's got the straps on them so you can put them over your shoulders, but then you can slide your rucksack inside your bouldering pad and you can take everything out with you that you need, rather than trying to do that kind of hideous combo of trying to put it on your front and then you've got a bouldering pad on your back and you can't see where you're going. That's a way that I really like doing it. If I'm really pressed and I need a lot of stuff with my kit, I'll actually take 2 narrow profile rucksacks out with me because they can just slide between the pad. So that's my go-to kit for going out bouldering. That's everything that I use, the choices of them, why I use them, and I really think all these items will make a difference to your climb or your day out. So I hope you find that useful, and now I'm going to get on with some bouldering and have my day out.